Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of One on One. I'm your host, Hannah Balkowski. Today, we are joined with Matt DeLucia, who graduated in 2007 and is a reporter and anchor at NBC10 here in Philadelphia. So, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. Okay, so let's jump right on into it. So, you've been a reporter and anchor with NBC10 in Philadelphia for a while now. What are some of your responsibilities as an anchor and reporter?
Well, I'm what is known as a general assignment reporter. So I'm basically doing anything that is happening that day. It can be anything from crime to politics, although I like to avoid politics. But breaking news, just to events as well, sports, things of that sort. So it really runs the gamut of whatever is news and is happening that day. I'm usually assigned to cover it in some aspect.
Okay, so do you write your own scripts, or how does that work in the industry?
Yeah, so it's a little bit different between the reporting side and anchoring side. So if you're anchoring, you do have producers and writers that are really helping because you're pretty much doing the bulk of the show. I mean, you're on TV for an hour, 2 hours, and then on the weekend, sometimes you're on TV 3, 4 hours straight. So you do have a lot of help in that regard, but you do have control over, massaging the scripts, changing it to your style, your inflection, things of that sort. But when you're a reporter, everything is written by you. So you're researching everything, you're calling people up, you're setting up the interviews, you're doing the interviews, you're logging the interviews, you're writing it. So it is you and the photographer. And in some cases, they have MMJs or one-man band crews, which is just one person doing everything, and you're doing it all. So everything that's happening in the field is done by the field crews.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a lot, in an 8-hour day. By the end of it, it's like, whew, it's a lot of work sometimes.
But I'm sure it's rewarding too, to see what you've, been able to share and stuff. Do you have a preference between anchoring or reporting, like in the field?
Well, it depends. So on like the really big stories, mostly the good stories I appreciate. The bad stuff, I mean, you got to cover it because it is news, it's current events, it's happening. But you want to be there. You really have a front row ticket to history in the making. And I know I'm a local reporter. I'm not going out, overseas to war zones or anything like that, thankfully. But you really are seeing your community and everybody around that community growing, going through things, whether it's a natural disaster or a rise in crime, or just having fun at a major event, or the Eagles in the Super Bowl. You're really there experiencing everything right up front. So it definitely leaves a lot of stories to tell. So I would rather be in the field for those things, but I will say on a hot day or a really cold, snowy day, I'll take the studio.
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't, right?
I know it's hard to pass that up,
Exactly. So, have you done okay, I'm sure you've done several stories. Do you have a particular experience or story that, was your favorite or something that was near and dear to your heart?
I mean, I know I'm brought up with the Eagles Super Bowl. I was in our helicopter the night that they won. So we had the Super Bowl on our air, and then like right after that, we were showing the celebrations, and I'm, hovering over Broad Street as people start climbing up City Hall. And I mean, it was an interesting sight to see. Later on, I did have to land, went down reporting on the ground, and there was a whole different perspective being in it. But it was definitely one of the more memorable moments. The other one that I think really stands out was about 7 years ago now, the Amtrak 188 crash that happened in the Port Richmond section of the city. I mean, just a horrible thing. But just watching the people come out to try to help the family members, the victims, and just the investigation that came out of that, you really did learn a lot about trains and transportation and legal issues and things of that sort. And I mean, that was a really long case. But those are some of the experiences that really do stick out in my mind. And then there's the everyday stuff. Sometimes I don't remember what I did last week, but you definitely remember those stories where you make an impact on somebody's life. Somebody, is going through something and you tell their story, and they appreciate that, because I think a lot of people want to share their experiences, even if it's something horrible. I can't tell you how many times, it's still difficult. I've been doing this for 17 years, but knocking on the door of someone who's just lost a loved one, you try to be as respectful as possible in that terrible situation. You just give them an opportunity. If they say no, okay, best wishes to you, my condolences, but you give them a chance to tell the story of their loved one, or whomever, was a victim of a certain incident. And, I think they really appreciate that, because you're you're conveying that legacy, you're conveying who that person was, and what they meant to their family, to their community. And I can't tell you how many times I get, like emails or letters, just saying, thanks for doing that. Thanks for telling my story. And, it's all in a day's work for us. But it's nice to have that kind of impact. Now, on the other hand, I do get a lot of other emails that are not as nice about other things, but that's being a journalist.
Yeah, you just push those to the side. It's okay.
Yeah. Right, yeah. Well, whatever. Hey, you know what? Everyone is entitled to their opinion.
Exactly. Well, speaking of, the not so great news, which is kind of, it's sad, but it happens. How do you keep your composure during, those stories? Because I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm like really emotional. So when I hear those stories, it's like hard to, contain everything. How do you do that?
I mean, it's tough. It really is tough, especially when it's happening, right in front of you, or has just happened. You can go to a breaking news scene, and then the family shows up, and it really is heart wrenching. Some of these things, especially when little kids are involved, and right now we're seeing in Philly, little kids getting shot. It's just really, really awful. And you try to get in your head, like, all right, you know what, I have a job to do. I've got to present the facts, to tell people what happened, try to talk with people who may have seen something, people who were impacted by it, to give a full picture of what was going on there. And then you go home at the end of the day, you try to put it out of your mind. You try to just watch a movie, try to just take your mind off of it, because it can really take a toll, especially when you're doing it day after day after day. It really does take a psychological toll. And I mean, I imagine the same thing, perhaps even more, goes on with police officers, firefighters, people who are really on the front lines, who really see this, to a level and a degree that we don't, or we're just kind of spectators. They're really involved. And I mean, my hat goes off to everyone who has to deal with that aspect of it.
Right, definitely. I mean, being right there, like, even though you're not necessarily in it, you're, sharing the story, so you're kind of part of it. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's heavy stuff,
It
but someone
is.
has to do it. So,
Someone has to do it. But then the next day, you might be covering a parade, or, some fun event, or, team in the playoffs or something like that. It's like,
yeah.
all right, you can take a moment and tell a good story, or do a feature story, and really shine in your craft and your writing. And that's what I really love. I love telling good feature stories, good community stories, and being able to really write and use the sound, use the video, and really just tell a spectacular story.
Right. Storytelling is super fun. I love doing it, and I'm glad to hear that other people love doing it too. So you have had a lot of experience reporting in different places, including Nevada, Maryland, and Massachusetts. Did you find any significant differences in the industry between locations?
Well, yeah, I mean, they're different market sizes. So, I mean, you're doing the same kind of thing. You're doing the news, it's the same things happen in, Massachusetts that they do in Nevada, and the same here in Philly, maybe to different degrees, but, the same kinds of things are happening. So you work in the smaller markets. I worked in Springfield, Massachusetts for a little over a year before I went to Las Vegas. And I mean, you really get a chance to you learn, you learn by doing. You're going to make mistakes. You're, going to screw something up. You're not going to be the greatest, on TV. But as you get more practice, then you get a lot better and you get a lot more comfortable. And then, you go to the next market and you're with people who have had that experience. So everyone kind of moves up to that level. And then when you get to Philly, which is the fourth largest television market in the country, everyone should have some decent level of experience to be at this point. And, you're dealing with pros. So the mistakes don't fly as much in a place like this because there are a lot more viewers and, your window of opportunity for making those critical errors that is behind you. So it's definitely tougher. You have to really, mind everything and check everything, double check everything, and just make sure that everything is accurate, factual, and correct. Because you will be called out on it. There's no question about that.
Sounds like a lot of pressure.
But it is a lot of pressure. But it's still just as challenging as it was when I first started out, because
Right.
you're still dealing with, the same issues, the same types of stories. It's just in a different place. So that doesn't get any easier. You just get better at doing it.
Right. So speaking of how you started out and stuff, how did you, out of college, how did you get started in your career? What were the steps that you took?
Well, a lot of it actually started when I was at LaSalle, and I was on. Right now it's LaSalle TV. Back then it was called LaSalle 56. So all of the OG people are we call it LaSalle 56. I was on cable there, and I did a show called Sportsline, and someone who was a producer at a PBS station in New Jersey saw me. He lived in Philly, saw me, and then called the station and asked if I could come in for an audition to be an on-air reporter. And I was like, all right, okay, we'll see what this is all about. And it turned out to be real. And I worked at, it was called NJN, New Jersey Network. Now it's, I think, New Jersey PBS. And I did a workforce show, talking about the labor market and things like that. And I, do headlines related to what was happening in New Jersey's workforce. It was, something that was weekly, but it was a great opportunity to get my feet wet while I was still in college. And then, I did that for a while. And then when I graduated, I went to Salisbury, Maryland, where I was a reporter and weekend sports anchor, then to Springfield, Massachusetts, then to Vegas, and then back here. So I kind of went all over the country. My goal was always to come back to Philly. So I kind of took a weird path. I seemed to go farther and farther away to come back, but I made it back. So it's all good in the end.
Yeah, it's full circle, right?
Full circle, right?
All right, so now you've given me an opportunity to start talking about LaSalle. Good segue. So speaking of LaSalle TV, or LaSalle 56, when you were there, what was one of your favorite experiences while working on a show?
I was there a lot. I practically lived in that comm center, editing stuff for shows and, getting things ready for whether it's I'm on air as an anchor for a show or directing a show, producing another show. I was very, very involved. And I think that my favorite time was, Sports Show Thursday, where we would record Sports Talk Philadelphia and then Sportsline, and then afterwards we would all go to what was the name of that dining hall? Treetops, which is right across from the comm center, and the whole staff, production crew, if you will, would go and have dinner, and it was just a fun vibe. From the time we started the shows to having dinner with everyone. It was like a 3-4 hour event every week. And it was just a real good bonding experience, not just, with my friends who, grown up with, but, just like freshmen, sophomore, junior, every grade level was there. And, you're a senior helping the younger folks come up. And I don't know, it was just a real fun time. I wish I could have that again, but everyone these days are, very busy.
You can always come guest star on one of the sports shows.
All
I'm
right.
sure they'd love it.
I'll hold you to that.
Yeah. Well, at LaSalle, that's one of my favorite things too, is like community, and especially within LaSalle TV, and the professors in the communication department too. I feel like they give so much guidance. What is something that you learned or gained from, your college experience that really helped you in your career?
I mean, I think it was just, professors giving me a sense of encouragement, helping me along. I mean, I remember one time the chair of the department, I was going to, sign up for a video production class, and she's like, Matt, let's be honest with you, you could teach this class. And it's like, okay, I had a lot of, it was a huge hobby of mine. I was, like I said, living in the comm center pretty much. So, I mean, it was nice to hear, that someone was like, hey, why don't you do an independent study or do this class or do this class that might be a little bit more challenging for you. It's because they knew how passionate I was about the subject. And I mean, just every class, I mean, up until like, there was an ethics course, and I still use some of the case material that we learned then today. I mean, it's amazing how everything kind of comes together. And the professor was saying, like, this isn't some lesson that you're just going to throw away. It's like the stuff that you're learning will be useful later on in life. And I do find that to be true every day. It's learning from people who have been in the business or studied communication, studied broadcasting for so long. You rely on that. You rely on that expertise, and they pass that down to me. And now I try to help in any way that I can with internships and things of that sort to help the next generation. So hopefully, I'm passing along what I learned from the great faculty and staff over at LaSalle.
Yeah, that's great. Students really look towards, the alum, see what they're doing, and, see, oh, there's so many different people working in different areas, and, oh, I can do that too. So it's good to hear that you all have the same experiences that we're having right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's definitely fun and really enjoy it, because when you're doing it at LaSalle, it's like, okay, I'm not getting paid for it or anything like that, but you get to have so much freedom. Once you're out in the real world, you're getting paid. It's like, no, you have a deadline. You have all of these things that you have to do. You have 3 stories that you have to get done by that day. You got to get this side, you got to get that side. It's a lot more involved, for
Yeah,
sure.
I bet. So have you always had, this love for journalism and reporting, or was there a particular moment where you really wanted to do this?
I mean, it really goes back to high school, and I did a little bit of the morning announcements team thing, in high school, and I kind of, and that was televised. So I mean, I did a little bit there, and I was in classes that focused on video projects. So I mean, I just kind of started to get more and more into it. And I would always watch the news every morning before going to school. I mean, I think that even dates back to when I was in middle school. Parents had it on, so I got to watch. I'm eating breakfast and then go to school. So it was kind of, I wouldn't say that it was a dream of mine early on, but it definitely is something that grew over time to something that I just started to love more and more the more I did it.
Yeah.
The more I did a video project, the more I edited something, the more I wrote something that I really liked. And it just grows the enjoyment.
Yeah. So last thing I want to ask is, do you have any advice for any aspiring journalists or reporters out there?
Uh, oh man, we'll be here for an hour on that one. Yeah, I mean, there are so many things I wish I would have been told, back then about the business, but it's changed so much. I mean, when I graduated from LaSalle, VHS tapes were still big. I mean, DVDs were just kind of starting to be the norm, and now like everything's digital. So it's just so much has changed. You just have to be ready for change, because what you're doing now will probably be completely different 5, 10 years from now. But the one thing that stays the same is storytelling, the ability to just captivate an audience and just be creative. And if you can do that, then you're set. But you do have to be ready to work hard. Be that MMJ, multimedia journals, where you're shooting, writing, editing, everything. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and you got to start the low markets and work your way up. The pay is not good in the beginning, but it does get better. And you just have to be willing to stick it out. I can tell you how many friends of mine over the years who have been in broadcasting and they got out because it's a challenge. It's very difficult to stick with it for all the reasons we talked about, in this interview. But not too many people stick around for too long. And if you really want to, go long and be in this business for decades, you really do have to have a passion for it. If you do, then you're definitely on the right path.
Yeah, definitely. I think, working hard is pretty much, even I think a lot of people say it's like who you know. And I was talking to another alumni and she was saying, yeah, it's about who you know, but it's also about like your motivation and your hard work. And so thank you for also saying that, because now it makes me feel better.
Yeah, and be willing to do anything. Be willing to take on any challenge. I mean, there was an opportunity a few years ago to do something that I was not very familiar with, but my news director was like, "We need you to do this," and I did, and I was like, "Okay, let me reluctantly go for it," and it ended up being a great learning experience where I was able to really grow as a person. And I think there are a lot of opportunities like that. You just have to be open to it, because you can't really seek them out all the time. Sometimes they just come to you and you might be like, this is not for me. I don't want to do that. But it can end up being really eye-opening. I mean, when I was in LaSalle, I took every opportunity that I could get. If ESPN was in town doing a football game or a baseball game, whatever, and they needed, production assistance. So we would just go, I was running wire, I was running cable at Lincoln Financial Field for a cameraman. It's like, what is this? But you're talking with people, you're getting to know and getting a feel for what that business is all about, and you're in it. And you have conversations, and it just helps you grow. And it's so much better to get that experience than what you're learning in the classroom. No offense to learning in the classroom, you get all the conceptual stuff there. But when you're out in the real world, in internships, in events where you're meeting people, that's where that learning really just balloons.
Right. It's like the second step of learning. You know it on your head and then you're putting it to use.
Got to apply it. Yep.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And it was a great conversation.
All right. Thanks for having me. I'm going to hold you to that. I'm coming back to LaSalle TV.
Yeah, you
one
should.
Of these days.
You should. I mean, I'll talk to everyone. We'll have guest stars. It'd be great.
There we go.
That's it for this episode of One on One. I'm your host, Hannah Balkowski, and we'll see you next time.